Black belts harass a little girl at the gym, unaware her father is a 11-time martial arts champion. At Ironclad Martial Arts Gym, a group of cocky black belts spotted 12-year-old Ava sitting quietly by herself, blonde hair tied back, seemingly invisible to their world of bravado. They thought they'd found an easy target for their latest joke, a chance to humiliate a shy little girl who didn't belong in their circle. But what they didn't know was that Ava carried a legacy few could match. Her father, Carver, was an 11-time martial arts champion, a legend whose shadow loomed large. In the span of a tense evening, Ava would turn their mockery into stunned silence, reclaiming respect not with noise or rage, but with the quiet strength of a true warrior. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. The mats were already warm with sweat and pride when Ava stepped onto them. 12 years old, blonde, barely 5 feet tall, and invisible. It was open mat night at Ironvale Dojo, a respected gym nestled on the outskirts of Phoenix. Rows of trophies lined the walls. Black belts moved like sharks across the mat, circling, testing, flexing. Coaches barked instructions. Parents watched from the benches. No one noticed the girl in the oversized gray hoodie, untying her worn sneakers in the corner. No one but her. Jessie Tran, a recent black belt promotion, was leading the youth sparring circuit that evening. A showman by nature. Loud, confident, too eager to impress the adults with every call-out. "That her," he said, nodding toward the girl. "She's your newest?" "The mouse." "She signed the waiver," Coach Ron muttered, already checking his clipboard for someone else. Jessie smirked. "Bet she doesn't last a minute. She even got a belt." Ava didn't answer. She knelt, tied her white belt in a quiet, practiced knot, and bowed toward the mat like it was sacred ground. Her movements were clean, deliberate, like someone who respected what this place represented, even if no one returned the gesture. "Yo, Snow White," Jessie called out. "You sparring or sightseeing?" Laughter from the sideline. Even the younger kids turned to look. Ava didn't blink. Her eyes followed the room like she was tracing something. Weight shifts, hand placements, balance points. Watching without reacting. One of the parents leaned toward another and whispered, "She looks lost." But the girl wasn't lost. She was watching the way a hawk watches the wind. Quiet, still, calculating. Her father always said that silence was a weapon too. You just had to know when to unsheath it. No one in that room recognized her last name when it was called during registration, Ava Carver. No one saw the calloused edges of her knuckles. No one saw the subtle scar above her left eye, the kind that doesn't come from falling off bikes. And absolutely no one noticed the folded black duffel bag tucked beside her hoodie, stitched with 3 faded initials. MC. On the west wall of Ironvale Dojo, just above the weapons rack, hung a photo most people didn't look at anymore. A black and white frame, edges cracked with age. A man mid-kick, frozen in flight. Lean, explosive, eyes locked on his opponent with absolute clarity. Underneath it, a brass plate. Master Carver, 11-time international champion. Founder. Warrior. Father. It was a name the elders remembered in whispers. A man whose legacy stretched beyond belts and medals. But tonight, that frame gathered dust, and no one made the connection. Ava sat on her knees by the edge of the mat, as was custom. Her posture perfect. Hands resting on thighs. Breathing slow and measured. She didn't fidget. Didn't speak. She waited for instruction like it was the only thing anchoring her to this world. Across the room, Jessie Tran cracked his knuckles and leaned over to his sparring partner. "Kid's too stiff. She's gonna panic the second someone rushes her." The partner, another black belt, Rico, shrugged. "She's probably just scared. Most kids are first time out." Jessie chuckled. Then maybe she should have brought her dad to hold her hand. That comment drifted just loud enough to reach Ava's ear. But her expression didn't change. She was trained not to let her face betray anything. Instead, her eyes lifted slightly, not toward Jessie, but to the wall behind him. The photo. One breath in, one breath out. A shadow moved behind the observation glass. A tall figure, beard flecked with gray, calm eyes, hands behind his back. Watching, not interfering, just present. No one in the gym noticed him. Yet, Coach Ron finally called it. White belt, Ava Carver. Circle up. The black belts barely looked as she stepped forward. Her GI sleeves were slightly too long. Her white belt frayed on one side. She looked like someone's kid sister tagging along. Jessie made a dramatic bow, winking toward the parents. All right, Miss Mouse. Let's see what you got. The other students chuckled. A couple of teens started filming with their phones. One even muttered, "This is going to be quick." Ava bowed, deeply, respectfully. Then she slid into her stance. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't modern. But it was precise. Old. Trained. The room didn't feel it yet. But one man behind the glass did. And his jaw tightened just slightly. Ava's stance didn't match her size. It matched something else. Something no one expected to see from a 12-year-old girl with soft blonde hair and scuffed sneakers tucked beside the mats. She wasn't imitating a kata she'd seen online. She wasn't mimicking TikTok forms or dojo drills. Her feet were rooted, heels just inside shoulder width, right hand relaxed at the hip, left hand extended like it was holding memory itself. Chin tucked, eyes steady. Not angry, not afraid. Balanced. Alive. Jessie blinked, just for a moment. There was something off about the way she moved. Not wrong, just different. Like her body had already memorized 100 fights she'd never been in. Coach Ron frowned. He'd seen that stance before. Not recently. Not from any of the new kids. From someone else. Someone who used to command silence just by stepping on the mat. Begin, came the call. Jessie approached with a swagger, bouncing on the balls of his feet, making a show of faint jabs and lazy shifts. His movements were quick, but exaggerated, a performance more than combat. Ava didn't flinch. She pivoted softly, adjusting just enough to keep her center. Her feet whispered over the mat, quiet, thoughtful. Jessie lunged, playful but fast, testing her. Ava ducked under with the fluidity of a wave rolling beneath a boat. No flash, no panic. She simply moved out of the way before the strike had even finished. The room shifted slightly. A few eyebrows lifted. From behind the glass, the tall man remained still, arms crossed. A flicker of pride ghosted across his lips. That stance, that breath, that timing. It was his. Back on the mat, Jessie laughed. Okay. Lucky dodge. But it wasn't luck. Not even close. Ava had trained for this since before she could read a full sentence. Her first punch was taught in a dusty garage in Nevada, not a pristine dojo. Her first sparring partner had been her father, not the legend from magazines, but the man who taped her wrists and whispered truths into her spirit. Never fight for applause, Ava. Fight to remember who you are. Every motion was built on that foundation. Not muscle memory, legacy. Not instinct, inheritance. She circled again. Jessie's grin faltered for a split second. Not because he was worried, but because for the first time, he realized the mouse wasn't running. She was waiting. Jessie reset, rolling his shoulders. All right, let's stop playing. He stepped in faster this time. A blur of motion, aiming a quick leg sweep followed by a low jab. A standard combo. Safe. Predictable. Ava shifted. One breath, one step. The sweep missed by inches. The jab never landed. Her frame seemed to dissolve between his strikes like smoke. Untouched, unshaken. That's when Jared, one of the assistant coaches, furrowed his brow. She didn't block, he whispered. She repositioned, before he even finished. From the benches, two parents sat up straighter. One of them squinted toward the mat. Carver, the man mumbled to himself. Why does that sound familiar? Rico, Jessie's earlier partner, was watching now too, no longer amused. His eyes flicked toward the glass. The man behind it hadn't moved. He stood like a statue, the way soldiers do when remembering a fallen brother. Calm. Still. Heavy. He didn't need to be seen. He was letting her own name rise from the silence. On the mat, Ava remained focused. Her hands didn't tremble. Her stance hadn't broken once. But her eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion. Just a flicker. She wasn't doing this for glory. She was doing this for him. Marcus Carver hadn't set foot on a mat in over 10 years. Not since the accident that took his brother. Not since he walked away from competition after his 11th title, quietly refusing the 12th. He never told Ava to follow his path. He told her stories instead, of humility, control, and the cost of arrogance. And every night, in the same backyard where he once shadowboxed under desert stars, she practiced. Alone. Never posting. never bragging, just moving, quietly, until her movements became the echoes of a name the world had nearly forgotten. Back in the gym, Jesse threw another strike. Ava deflected, not with strength, but with timing. A parry that barely touched him, but redirected his entire weight off balance. Her hand slid across his wrist like wind against stone. He stumbled, caught himself. Now the laughter had stopped. Coach Ron turned to Jared, hushed. What did she say her name was again? Carver. Ron's voice dropped. Not Marcus Carver. A pause. Then a murmur rippled across the mats. And Jesse, for the first time, looked like he wanted to ask a question. But Ava didn't give him the chance. She moved again. And this time, the room followed her. The tension had shifted, but Jesse didn't recognize it for what it was. He mistook the quiet for confusion. Not respect. Not yet. She's just dodging, he said loudly, standing upright and brushing off invisible dust from his GI. No technique. No pressure. She's wasting everyone's time. He was talking to the room now, not to Ava. And for a moment, people believed him. Because that's what the voice of confidence often does. It fills the silence before truth has time to settle. Coach Ron looked uneasy. Jared crossed his arms. Rico leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching Ava like a riddle he hadn't yet solved. Jesse turned toward the benches, where some parents were now whispering. Look, I get it, Jesse said, gesturing toward Ava like she was a misplaced prop. You want to be inclusive, give everyone a shot. But come on, she's not applying pressure. No aggression. No offense. He glanced back to her. She doesn't belong here. Ava stood still. She didn't argue, didn't react, just breathed, steady and silent. But inside her chest, her heart tightened. Not in fear, in memory. Those words weren't new. She'd heard them before. On playgrounds. At tournaments where judges mistook her father's legacy for an unfair advantage. At schools where the other girls rolled their eyes at her calloused hands and broken fingernails. She didn't belong. She didn't fit. She didn't talk enough. Too quiet. Too strange. She had learned, long ago, that some people only measure strength by volume. But her father had taught her that silence, when held with intention, was louder than shouting. Jesse turned to the coaches, arms open. You want me to keep pretending this is a real match? Or should we find her a yoga mat and juice box? The laughter returned, weaker now, but still present. And that's when the man behind the glass moved. One step forward, just enough for the light to catch the edge of his face. Ron turned, catching it out of the corner of his eye. His voice caught in his throat. Is that? But he didn't finish the sentence. Because at that moment, Ava's posture shifted. She took one step forward, then stopped, and without a word, raised her right hand, open palm, fingers extended. A traditional gesture from Okinawan kata. Old, specific. Only a few people in the world still taught it. And one of them had vanished from the circuit a decade ago. Now, his daughter stood in his shadow. But only for a moment. Jesse didn't see the raised hand for what it was. He saw a challenge. A slow, deliberate one. The kind that offended his pride. He stepped in again, this time sharper, heavier, not playful. His brows furrowed, jaw locked. There was no smirk anymore. You think you're something special? He muttered under his breath, audible only to Ava. Ava didn't reply. Her eyes were still. Her shoulders relaxed. Jesse lunged. But the moment he crossed into range, her left foot slid diagonally. Perfect 45-degree angle. And her right palm caught his wrist in mid-strike. Not hard. Not fast. But impossibly timed. She didn't throw him. She didn't strike him. She simply redirected his entire motion off course with a pivot that spun him 90 degrees on his own feet. He stopped just short of falling. And the gym fell utterly silent. That's when a deep voice echoed from the observation glass. One word. Enough. The room turned. And there he was. Marcus Carver. Not in a GI. Not in a belt. Just jeans, boots, and a plain black long-sleeve shirt. But even without the uniform, the presence was unmistakable. Some of the older students froze. One of the assistant coaches gasped. That's really him. Jesse stood, breathing hard, confused, trying to play it off. What's he doing here? Marcus walked forward, slow, steady, past the glass, through the gym doors, until his boots touched the edge of the mat. His steps made no sound, but every pair of eyes turned toward him. He looked at Jesse, not with anger, with pity. You mocked her form, Marcus said, voice calm as stone. Because you didn't understand it. Jesse opened his mouth to speak, but Marcus cut him off. You've been taught to strike, but not to feel. You spar to win. She trains to listen. Then he turned, not to the crowd, not to the coaches, but to Ava. She hadn't moved, and Marcus nodded once. A signal only the two of them understood. The coaches were already standing, but someone in the back, an old student, now a parent, finally stepped forward. He looked at Jesse, then at Marcus, and whispered, "You didn't recognize her because she doesn't carry his name like a banner." Jesse blinked. "What name?" Marcus answered without raising his voice. "She carries it like a responsibility." Jesse stepped back, the smirk gone, his face a portrait of confusion wrapped in bruised ego. The whispers were spreading now, faster than he could control. Marcus Carver. Here. Watching. Speaking. And not just speaking, defending. His daughter. Jesse looked again at Ava, but now, he saw her differently. The same stance, same frame, but suddenly, it looked like something ancient. Anchored. Like the stillness before an avalanche. Rico murmured to Jared. "No wonder. That shift she did, that was Ryukyu line kata. Nobody uses that anymore. Except Carver," Jared finished. Ava remained motionless, waiting for the next cue, not from the coaches, but from her father's presence. She didn't need validation from the room. She didn't even seem aware of the stir her movements had caused. But the others saw it now. They began rewinding her every motion in their minds. The small pivots, the control, the breathing. She never lost control of distance, Ron whispered to himself. Not once. Jesse tried to reset his confidence. "Okay," he said too loudly. "So she knows a couple forms. Doesn't mean she can. Do you even know what you're looking at?" Marcus's voice cut through again, not angry, just waited. Jesse stiffened. Yeah, that stance," Marcus said, nodding toward Ava. "It's called the waiting crane. You won't find it on YouTube. You won't find it in belt tests. You won't learn it at seminars. It's passed from blood." He looked around the room. "She's the last student of my lineage." Gasps whispered from wall to wall. Jesse swallowed hard. Ava lowered her hand gently, bowing not just to the coaches, but to the silence. A kid near the front looked up at his mom. "Is that the man you showed me in the old tournament tapes?" The mother nodded, slowly. "And that's his daughter." The crowd was shifting. Even the students Jesse had trained began pulling back from his side, recalibrating what they thought they knew. But Ava didn't bask in the moment. She simply stepped back to the edge of the mat, knelt down, and folded her hands. Still the quietest presence in the room. Still watching. Still waiting. Because legacy, as Marcus once told her, doesn't need to raise its voice. It just needs to stand long enough for the world to remember. Coach Ron took a slow breath and crossed the mat toward Ava, crouching beside her as whispers buzzed like electricity through the room. He didn't speak right away, just watched her. She sat with perfect stillness, palms on her knees, head slightly lowered, not in shame, not in fatigue, but in quiet discipline. He finally said, "Your form. Where'd you learn it?" She looked up, calm. "Home. From your dad." A slight nod. Ron tilted his head. "That pivot, the old Ryukyu transition. That's not in any modern syllabus." Ava's eyes lifted to meet his. There was no pride in her voice, only memory. "He taught me how to disappear inside a fight. Not to be seen, just to move." Behind them, Jesse was still trying to shake it off. He crossed his arms, voice cracking slightly. "So what? She knows a few rare moves. That doesn't make her a fighter." Marcus finally stepped forward, stopping just at the edge of the mat. His presence didn't demand attention. It dismantled it. He set down a folded black cloth on the edge of the bench. Worn, embroidered. A dojo sash. 3 words stitched along the edge in white thread. "Balance before bravado." Ava saw it and bowed her head. Jesse looked at it like it was just decoration. "What's that supposed to be? A towel?" Marcus turned to him, eyes steady. That cloth was soaked in the sweat of 1,000 hours. The weight of loss. The silence after my last match. He glanced at Ava. She trained not to win, but to understand. Rico stepped closer now, no longer hiding his curiosity. "She hasn't even sparred full contact yet, has she?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to Ava and asked, "Do you still remember the rhythm?" Ava stood slowly. Then she bowed, once to her father, once to the mat, and stepped into position. The gym felt a silence. She moved. No opponent. No music. Just her. A kata older than anyone in the room. Low stances, sharp pivots, explosive bursts of motion, then stillness. Every move had precision. Every breath had purpose. Not one motion wasted. Halfway through, Rico exhaled. She's not just repeating forms, she's controlling time. Jesse looked around and felt it. The shift, the unease. Not toward her power, but toward how blind he'd been to it. Ava's movements faded into stillness, her kata ending with both knees bent and her hands placed lightly over her heart. The room was silent, not out of confusion anymore, but out of something heavier. Recognition. But her mind wasn't in the gym anymore. It was in the garage. Concrete floor. Rubber mats taped together with the edges curling. A punching bag hanging from an old ceiling beam that creaked when the wind shifted. Dust in the air. The hum of cicadas outside. The desert heat pressed against the walls like a second skin. And her father, younger then, beard darker, shoulders broader, sitting cross-legged with his back against the water heater, watching her. She was 9. Her foot had just slipped during a pivot. Again, tears welled in her eyes. Not from pain. Frustration. She kicked the mat and shouted, "I can't do it like you." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He never did. He simply said, "Then don't." She looked up, startled. "Don't do it like me," he said. "Do it like you." He stood slowly, walked toward her, and knelt. "You don't fight because you're supposed to. You fight because sometimes the world forgets how to listen." And silence. Ava, silence is not absence. It's potential. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Let them call you quiet. But make sure you're listening louder than anyone else." Back in the gym, Ava stood from her finishing pose. Her eyes found her father's through the glass. They both remembered. The long nights. The bruises. The silence after her mother left. When Ava didn't speak for almost a year. When the only way she communicated was through movement. Through kata. Through training. It was never about competition. Never about belts. It was therapy. Translation. The only language they shared without needing words. And that folded cloth he placed on the bench? It was the one her mother had stitched for Marcus before his final tournament. She left the day after he won. He never wore the sash again. Until Ava asked him, months ago, if she could. And now, it rested there, between them. Not as decoration. As inheritance. The gym didn't know all of that. But they saw its weight. Because sometimes, the heaviest stories are carried in the lightest steps. There were 11 trophies in the Carver household, but none on display. Marcus kept them wrapped in a canvas sack beneath his bed, next to an old leather-bound journal and a faded photo of 3 men in tournament GIs. Him, his younger brother Caleb, and their sensei, arms around each other, grinning like boys on the edge of legacy. That photo hadn't seen sunlight in years. The last time Marcus had stood on a podium was the day after Caleb died. Tournament finals in Bangkok. They had agreed to compete together one last time, as brothers. Caleb never made it to the mat. A car wreck the night before, hit and run. No witnesses. No time to say goodbye. Marcus fought anyway. He didn't know why. Maybe it was numbness. Maybe it was duty. He moved through the bracket like a machine, winning every match in silence. His opponent in the final bowed twice, once out of respect, once out of fear. Marcus didn't celebrate the win. He flew home the next day, packed the medals, the belts, the uniforms. Never taught again. Never fought again. Until Ava. She was 6 when she first found him shadowboxing behind the garage, not performing, just remembering. "Why do you still practice if you don't fight anymore?" she asked. He knelt, handed her one of his old black belts, frayed, faded. He wrapped it around her waist like a scarf, too long and dragging behind her. "To remember the man I promised to become," he said. That promise had changed over the years. It wasn't about glory. It was about never forgetting. And Ava had never forgotten. Every night, after her homework, she trained. Every weekend, while other kids went to movies or malls, she was in the garage, practicing. Not because he told her to, because it centered her. It gave her something nothing else could, peace through motion. Now, at 12, she moved like someone with years beyond her frame, because she carried years that weren't hers. His years. Caleb's years. Years of quiet dedication and deliberate sacrifice. In Iron Veil Dojo, she stood at the edge of the mat as whispers swirled around her. But she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her father had always said, "The greatest warriors don't chase attention. They carry history." And history was standing right there. On bare feet. in perfect stillness. The gym was no longer just a place for sparring or casual drills. The air had shifted, thickened with unspoken respect and an electric tension that hummed beneath the surface. Every breath, every step felt heavier, more deliberate. Ava stood calmly in the center of the mat, the very image of controlled focus. Despite her youth, there was a grace to her movements that commanded attention. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, strands clinging to her forehead from the effort she'd already given. Yet her eyes held no arrogance, only quiet determination. Jesse, still grappling with his bruised ego, narrowed his eyes and muttered under his breath, "She's good, but I'm not done yet." He stepped forward once more, his posture more measured, less showy. Gone was the cocky grin and flamboyant gestures. Now, every movement was calculated, a tactical strike meant to test the limits of Ava's defense. This was no longer a performance. It was a challenge. Ava responded with equal precision. She moved as though every muscle remembered a lifetime of training, though the truth was she had only lived 12 years. Her defense wasn't flashy, it was economical. Each shift in weight, each subtle adjustment of stance, spoke volumes about her understanding of timing and distance. The gym fell silent. Not a single whisper. The usual rustle of gear and shifting feet vanished. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to dim as everyone's eyes stayed locked on the two figures exchanging blows with grace and control. Jesse's frustration began to seep through. His breaths came quicker, his punches less smooth, edged with impatience. He wasn't used to facing an opponent who didn't react with fear or desperation, but with calm resilience. Then came the moment that made the entire room hold its breath. Jesse launched a low, sharp kick, aimed to catch Ava off guard, fast and powerful. But she was ready. With an almost imperceptible slide of her left foot forward, Ava intercepted the strike. Her block was firm but gentle, enough to halt Jesse's momentum without aggression. Almost like a whisper against stone. Without hesitation, Ava countered, a light tap on his ribs, delivered not with force, but perfect timing that unbalanced him. Jesse stumbled back, eyes wide with surprise and newfound respect. At that moment, his gaze met Marcus Carver's steady eyes across the mat. Calm, unyielding, filled with quiet authority. Ava did not gloat. She simply bowed to Jesse with the respect owed to a worthy opponent. The gym exhaled collectively, a release of the tension that had built for so long. Marcus stepped back, folding his hands behind his back. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. Control is not the absence of movement, but the mastery of it. Jesse's posture slackened, shoulders lowering as realization settled over him. He nodded, a silent acceptance that things had changed, not just for him, but for everyone watching. The gym, once noisy and casual, had transformed into a chamber of respect and reverence. And Ava? She stood quietly in the center, a young girl who carried an ancient legacy, her journey only just beginning. The room's energy had shifted again. Where before it was curiosity mixed with skepticism, now there was anticipation, a charged expectation lingering like the calm before a storm. Jesse straightened his GI, a flicker of resolve flashing across his face. He wasn't about to concede. Not here. Not in front of this crowd. "We're not finished yet," he said, voice low but steady. "You've shown skill, but let's see if you can keep up." Ava didn't respond verbally. She simply returned to her stance, centered and ready. Her gaze never wavered from Jesse. Around the gym, whispers spread like wildfire. Parents leaned forward in their seats. Young students exchanged glances. Even Coach Ron felt the pressure mounting. Jesse launched the next series, faster, sharper, more aggressive. This time, there was no room for measured sparring. His strikes were precise and relentless, testing her endurance, reaction time, and mental composure. Ava moved with silent confidence. Every block, every step backward, was deliberate. Her breathing remained steady, her eyes calm, like a still lake beneath a stormy sky. It was as if she was absorbing every attack not just with muscle and reflex, but with intention. Jesse's frustration grew. His body tensed, shoulders rising as his strikes became less controlled, fueled by impatience. But Ava stayed poised. Then, as Jesse overcommit to a roundhouse kick, Ava shifted her weight expertly, stepping just outside his range. With the precision of a master, she swept his supporting leg, gently but effectively toppling him to the mat. The room gasped. Jesse looked up, breathless, a flicker of shock and respect crossing his face. Marcus Carver stepped forward, voice calm but firm. That was not defeat. That was discipline. Jesse struggled to rise, then met Marcus's gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The crowd's mood transformed once more, from tension to reverence. It was no longer a contest of strength, but a lesson in humility, patience, and respect. Ava helped Jesse to his feet, bowing deeply to him and the assembled crowd. And in that moment, the gym wasn't just a training hall anymore. It was a place where legacy was honored and respect reclaimed. The subtle hum of the gym's fluorescent lights seemed to grow louder in the heavy silence. The taste of sweat and anticipation lingered in the air as Ava and Jesse squared off once again. But this time, the stakes had risen beyond personal pride. This was no longer about a simple sparring match. It was about respect, legacy, and proving what lay beneath the surface. Jesse wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, eyes narrowing. "I'm not going easy on you just because your dad's here," he said, voice low and steady. "You've earned this." Ava's lips parted briefly in a faint smile, respect without arrogance. She nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement of the battle ahead. The crowd leaned in, every eye glued to the unfolding moment. Coaches exchanged quick glances, parents held their breaths. This was more than sport, it was a test of spirit. Jesse moved first, his strikes quicker and more varied. He shifted between jabs, kicks, and feints, trying to unsettle the calm fortress that was Ava's defense. But she responded with a composed grace, blocking and redirecting each attack as if moving through a well-rehearsed dance. Her breathing remained steady, her body language serene yet alert. Each motion an expression of years of quiet discipline, not bluster. Then came the moment when Jesse attempted a feint, aiming to bait Ava into a premature strike. But Ava saw through it instantly. With the precision of a seasoned fighter, she countered with a low sweep that brought Jesse off balance. He stumbled but caught himself, eyes wide with surprise and growing respect. Marcus watched silently, his gaze steady. "Control is not dominance. It's balance," he murmured. Jesse straightened, exhaling deeply. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "More than you know." Ava bowed slightly. "Thank you." The gym seemed to breathe again, the tension dissolving into mutual respect. For the first time, Jesse saw not just the girl in front of him, but the legacy she carried, the quiet strength inherited from a champion who had given everything. This wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson. The gym had fallen into a silence, so deep it felt almost sacred. Every breath, every heartbeat, seemed magnified in the stillness. The usual clatter of training gear, the murmur of casual chatter, all gone. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very walls were waiting for something profound to unfold. Ava stood alone on the mat, her small frame calm and unyielding. Her blonde hair was pulled back tightly, revealing eyes steady and clear. There was no trace of fear or hesitation. Instead, there was a quiet power, a strength born not of bluster, but of discipline. Jesse, standing opposite her, wiped the sweat from his brow and glanced nervously at Marcus Carver, who had stepped forward from the shadows. Marcus's presence filled the room like a steady tide, calm yet undeniable. The weight of his reputation, his legacy, hung heavy in the space between them. "She is not just a student," Marcus said, his voice low and steady, carrying a gravity that silenced even the whispering crowd. "She is the living continuation of a legacy you all thought lost." A murmur passed through the crowd, disbelief, awe, curiosity. Jesse's gaze flickered between Marcus and Ava, understanding beginning to dawn on him that this was far beyond a simple sparring match. Ava took a deep breath, centering herself. Then, with a grace that seemed to slow time, she moved into a stance so pure and deliberate it was almost reverent. Her feet rooted firmly to the mat, her hands poised with exactness, she began. Each motion was a precise echo of a tradition older than anyone present. The kata she performed was not flashy or showy. It was austere, disciplined, and deeply meaningful. Her strikes were crisp and calculated, each block and pivot executed with a mastery that spoke of countless hours spent in quiet practice. The black belts watching exchanged uneasy glances, whispering under their breath. Gasps escaped as they realized the depth of her skill. This was no child mimicking forms, but a true practitioner honed by heritage and relentless dedication. Jesse's eyes widened, his earlier bravado replaced by a growing respect tinged with disbelief. This girl, small and quiet, was wielding a power born from sacrifice, love, and centuries of discipline. Marcus observed from the edge of the mat, a faint, proud smile playing on his lips, shadows of old battles flickering in his steady gaze. When Ava finished, she lowered her hands slowly, bowing deeply not to seek approval, but to honor the art, the lineage, and those who had come before her. The gym remained hushed for a moment longer. Then a slow, respectful clap began, low and tentative at first, growing steadily louder, echoing off the walls. Jesse stepped forward, extending a hand with genuine respect. "Your father taught you well." Ava accepted the handshake with quiet grace, no words needed. In that moment, the silence broke into something far more powerful. Respect earned not through loud declarations, but through quiet mastery and an unshakable presence. The gym seemed to hold its breath as Marcus Carver's words settled over the crowd. His hand still rested lightly on Ava's shoulder, a quiet gesture laden with unspoken history and the passing of a torch. The presence of the 11-time champion next to his daughter transformed the space, reframing every moment that had come before. Ava's gaze swept slowly over the room, taking in faces now softened by respect and understanding. No one saw her as just a little girl anymore. She was a living testament to years of sacrifice, training, and quiet perseverance, an embodiment of a legacy forged in sweat and silence. Her voice was steady but barely above a whisper as she spoke again. "I don't fight for trophies. I don't fight for recognition. I fight so that those who can't speak, who have been forgotten, will have someone standing in their place." The crowd was silent. Some held back tears. Others nodded with slow, reverent understanding. Marcus lowered his voice, sharing a part of their story few had heard before. "When I won my last title, it was with the memory of my brother Caleb on my mind. We fought together once, side by side, but he never made it home from that final tournament. I promised him then that I would carry our fight forward, not just in competition, but in honor and discipline." Ava carries that promise now. A flash of memory rippled through the room. A photograph Marcus kept hidden. 3 brothers in GIs, smiles wide, eyes full of dreams. A promise unspoken, but deeply felt. Jesse, still catching his breath from the earlier sweep, swallowed hard. The weight of his earlier arrogance seemed to crush him now. "I was blind," he admitted quietly. "You, both of you, carry something I never understood. It's not just skill. It's heart. It's honor." Marcus nodded solemnly. True strength is quiet. It doesn't need to shout or demand attention. It waits. It endures. And when the moment comes, it reveals itself, not through force, but through presence. Ava bent slightly, bowing not just to her father or to the gym, but to the legacy of those who had come before her, those who had sacrificed so much in silence. As she stood, her small figure seemed somehow larger, filled with the weight of generations. The gym erupted, not in chaotic noise, but in a wave of heartfelt respect. Claps rang out, steady and sincere, echoing a truth long buried beneath doubt. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. Ava and Marcus exchanged a glance, one of quiet pride, understanding, and unbreakable bond. This was more than a sparring match. It was a reclaiming of honor, a legacy restored, and a promise kept. The room was thick with a profound stillness, the kind that comes only when true understanding settles over a crowd. No one spoke. No one moved. The echo of applause had faded into the background, leaving behind a reverent silence that wrapped around every person like a shared secret. Jesse stood, shoulders heavy with humility, his gaze lowered as if carrying the weight of his own earlier ignorance. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. Instead, he bowed deeply, not just to Ava, but to the legacy she represented. The older students and coaches exchanged looks, their eyes shining with newfound respect. Parents whispered quietly, recognizing the unspoken truth. The girl they'd underestimated was not only a skilled martial artist, but a living vessel of a remarkable heritage. Marcus Carver remained calm, his expression solemn yet proud. The years of sacrifice, training, and quiet perseverance had culminated in this moment. Not a show of dominance, but a restoration of honor. He knew the journey was far from over, yet today, the unyielding spirit of his lineage had spoken louder than any championship title. Ava, standing beside him, was still the quiet girl with steady eyes and unwavering poise. She had never sought recognition or praise, but in this moment, her presence was undeniable. Her humility and strength had transformed the room without a single boast or shout. One of the gym's elder instructors, a grizzled veteran who had trained alongside Marcus years ago, stepped forward slowly. His voice was low but carried the weight of respect earned over decades. "You honor us all," he said, nodding toward Ava. "You remind us that true strength is born of patience, discipline, and quiet courage." The crowd responded with a gentle murmur of agreement. Marcus placed a steady hand on Ava's shoulder, his eyes meeting hers with a silent vow of continued guidance and support. Then, as if sensing the moment had reached its natural close, Ava bowed once more, this time to the entire gym, before stepping away from the mat with the quiet dignity that had carried her through every challenge. The silence lingered, not awkward but sacred, a collective acknowledgement that something meaningful had transpired, a truth recognized, a legacy reclaimed. No words were necessary. Respect was spoken in the stillness. The gym held its breath. The usual clatter of training mats, the murmurs of casual chatter, even the soft scuffs of shoes on the polished floor, all fell away, swallowed by an enveloping silence that felt almost sacred. It was as if the very air inside had thickened, charged by the weight of what had just transpired. Parents, who moments ago had been whispering excitedly, now spoke in hushed tones, eyes shining with respect and a touch of awe. Some pressed a hand to their chest, their faces reflecting a profound recognition. The children, once restless and distracted, sat upright, their youthful eyes wide with wonder and a dawning appreciation for something larger than themselves. Jesse remained on the mat, kneeling, his chest rising and falling in deep breaths. The cocky bravado that had once defined him was stripped bare, replaced by a heavy humility. His eyes, once sharp and dismissive, now held a quiet reverence. The lesson was clear, and it stung more deeply than any physical blow could. True strength was not loud or boastful. It was measured, patient, and profound. Marcus Carver stood silently beside Ava, arms folded loosely across his chest, his gaze never wavering from his daughter. He saw in her the living legacy he had fought to preserve, the quiet resilience forged through years of sacrifice, loss, and unwavering discipline. There was no need for grand gestures or prideful declarations. Her calm dignity spoke louder than any trophy or medal ever could. Coach Ron approached Marcus cautiously, lowering his voice so only the two of them could hear. "She's the real deal," he murmured, a note of admiration thick in his tone. Marcus nodded solemnly. "She's carried this weight since before she could walk," he replied softly. His eyes softened as they met Ava's, who was methodically readying her belt with the precision and calm of a seasoned warrior. In that simple act, 1,000 unspoken words passed between father and daughter, a bond stronger than any verbal exchange. Then Marcus stepped forward, addressing the entire gym with a quiet but commanding presence. "What you witnessed today was more than skill or technique," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "It was the embodiment of a legacy built on discipline, sacrifice, and profound respect. It is now your responsibility to carry that understanding forward." The gym absorbed the weight of his words, the silence deepening as everyone reflected on the meaning behind them. Ava took a slow, steady breath, and with a final, graceful bow to the room, she turned and walked toward the exit. Her steps were soft but resolute, carrying the unshakable strength of one who had reclaimed her dignity not through confrontation, but through presence. As the gym gradually stirred back to life, the atmosphere remained forever changed. The lesson taught that day, one of quiet strength and unyielding honor, lingered like a gentle echo, and the legacy would endure. The gym was nearly empty now. The harsh fluorescent lights softened as the evening shadows crept across the polished floors. The noise and tension that had filled the air earlier had dissolved into a calm stillness, the kind that follows something profound. It was the silence of respect, of battles fought and won beyond the glare of public spectacle. Ava sat alone on the worn wooden bench near the entrance, her small hands folded gently in her lap. The quiet hum of the gym's ventilation was a faint backdrop to the weight in her chest, a mix of relief, exhaustion, and something deeper, the steady pulse of dignity reclaimed. The adrenaline had ebbed away, leaving only a peaceful calm that wrapped around her like a familiar cloak. Marcus approached slowly, the careful measured steps of a man who had carried his own burdens for decades. His eyes softened as he saw his daughter sitting quietly, her posture relaxed but still carrying the unmistakable grace of a warrior. In his hands, he carried a small, folded piece of cloth, a dojo sash, well-worn and embroidered with the motto that had guided his own journey: balance before bravado. He knelt beside Ava and gently placed the sash across her knees. The fabric was old, but its meaning was timeless. "You earned this," Marcus said softly, his voice thick with unspoken emotion. "Not because of what you showed them today, but because of who you are when no one is watching." Ava looked up at him, her steady blue eyes meeting his with a mixture of gratitude, understanding, and the quiet strength that had carried her through countless hours of solitary training. She reached out, fingers lightly brushing the sash's worn threads, feeling the weight of generations stitched into every fiber. This sash wasn't just a piece of cloth, it was a symbol of legacy, sacrifice, and the silent battles fought in the shadows of a noisy world. It was the mantle of quiet warriors who never sought glory but carried their honor with unwavering resolve. Outside, the last golden rays of sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long, warm shadows across the gym's worn mats and equipment. It was a gentle reminder that every ending held the promise of a new beginning. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a creased, faded photograph. He unfolded it carefully and held it out to Ava. The image showed three brothers, all wearing GIs, arms draped around one another, their smiles wide and unguarded. A frozen moment of hope, youth, and unbreakable bond. "This is where it began," Marcus said quietly, voice thick with memory and loss. "And where it continues, through you." Ava's eyes glistened with tears as she took the photograph, her fingers tracing the faces she had only known through stories and memories. She swallowed hard, a single tear sliding down her cheek. She wasn't a girl who needed loud victories or public acclaim. Her strength was in her silence, in the resilience carried through every breath, every deliberate step, every kata practiced in the solitude of a dusty garage late at night. The gym behind them was empty now, yet the story was far from over. As father and daughter rose to leave, Ava carefully folded the sash and tucked it into her bag, alongside the photograph. Together, they stepped into the quiet evening, carrying with them more than just memories or medals. They carried a promise, a legacy reclaimed not through spectacle or violence, but through quiet strength, discipline, and dignity. And that was a victory no one could ever take away. The gym's doors closed softly behind them, the muted click echoing through the empty corridor. Outside, the city had slipped into the quiet rhythm of night, streetlights casting pools of amber on the pavement, and a gentle breeze carrying the cool promise of a new beginning. Ava and Marcus walked side by side, their steps measured and calm. The tension that had gripped the day gradually eased, replaced by a stillness that felt both heavy and comforting. They moved without haste, the silence between them rich with unspoken understanding and shared history. Ava's bag hung lightly from her shoulder, the sash and the worn photograph safely tucked inside, a tangible connection to a past she was only beginning to fully embrace. She glanced up at the stars, faint pinpricks against the dark canvas of the sky, and felt the weight of legacy settle warmly in her chest. Ahead, a small park lay bathed in the gentle glow of flickering street lamps. Children's laughter floated softly through the night air, a reminder of innocence and the future yet to come. Ava's lips curved into a subtle, wistful smile. She knew her path would not be easy. There would be struggles and quiet battles fought away from the spotlight. But she also understood something deeper now. Strength was not about showmanship or noise. It was about endurance, discipline, and the courage to stand steady when no one else was watching. Marcus looked over at his daughter, pride evident but tempered with humility. "You showed them something today they've forgotten," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. Presence, patience, strength without boast. Ava met his gaze, calm and sure. "I fight for the moments that go unseen," she replied softly. "For those whose voices have been silenced." They continued walking, their shadows long and intertwined on the pavement. The city lights above flickered like distant fires, a reminder that hope and resilience burned quietly within the heart of the world. As they reached their doorstep, Marcus paused and turned to Ava. "Remember this," he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "True strength isn't just what you show the world. It's what you carry deep inside." Ava nodded, her eyes reflecting both resolve and gratitude. "I understand," she whispered. With a final embrace, quiet but full of unbreakable love, they parted ways for the night. Inside, Ava felt the weight of her legacy settle not as a burden, but as a promise. A promise to carry forward the discipline, honor, and quiet dignity of those who had come before her. The night wrapped around the city like a soft blanket, holding its breath with the knowledge that tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. And in the heart of that silence, the legacy lived on. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.